Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are strapping in for a wild, fascinating journey into the life of a man who is arguably the most recognizable face in heavy metal, yet whose longevity and journey constantly surprise even his biggest fans. John Michael Osbourne, better known globally as Ozzy.
It's quite a career to try and unpack. He's this figure just synonymous with chaos, really, but also with this incredible, almost calculated commercial longevity.
Right.
So our mission today, I suppose, is to distill this massive amount of information. We're talking 76 years of music, mayhem, and, surprising business savvy by focusing on that deep, strange split. You know, the madman of rock persona he leaned into and the genuine multi-platinum success that kept him going across, 4 decades.
And that commercial footprint is just staggering. It's genuinely hard to get your head around the numbers. We're talking over 100 million albums sold.
100 million.
Yeah, combining his pioneering work with Black Sabbath and then that colossal solo career. And the industry recognition is finally complete now, isn't it?
Absolutely. He's one of those rare few inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, not just once, but twice.
With Sabbath back in 2006, and then just recently, 2024, as a solo artist.
That dual entry, well, it tells you pretty much everything about his lasting influence, doesn't it? It speaks volumes about a guy who started life in, post-war industrial England and somehow became this global cultural force.
John Michael Osbourne, born 1948.
Yeah, and he quickly got that notorious alias, the Prince of Darkness, a title he certainly lived up to. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes maybe not so much.
He really evolved, though, didn't he?
Yeah.
From singer, songwriter, to this huge media personality and an iconoclast in every sense.
Totally.
Okay, let's unpack this and start right at the very beginning. Because to understand the icon, the one who courted the press with, bat-biting antics and all that, you really have to understand the gritty environment he came from. It was anything but rock royalty.
Oh, not at all. He was born in Marston Green, grew up in the Aston area of Birmingham, England, right in the industrial heartland. His family was absolutely working class.
How many kids were there?
6 children living in this tiny 2-bedroom house on Lodge Road. A very, very crowded environment. His dad was a tool maker. His mother worked at a Lucas factory, assembling components. Pretty standard, really, but tough. Life was focused on survival, not spectacle.
And he had some pretty serious academic challenges early on, which must have fed that feeling of being an outsider. We know he dealt with dyslexia.
Exactly. And dyslexia back then, it wasn't diagnosed, wasn't treated.
No support.
No. So dealing with it in that system meant he was just left behind, really.
Yeah.
He ended up leaving formal education really young, just 15.
15, wow.
Yeah, and that set him on this path of manual labor, which was incredibly hard graft. He bounced through some seriously gritty jobs, stuff that really defines you, I think.
Like what?
He was a construction site laborer, a trainee plumber. He did a stint as an apprentice tool maker, and most famously worked in a car factory tuning horns.
The horn tuner.
That's the one. And also worked at a slaughterhouse for a bit. I mean, just imagine the sensory imprint from those places. You can almost see how that might translate into the darkness of the music later on.
It wasn't just tough jobs either. There was that early run-in with the law that gave him a taste of, the other side.
That's a really pivotal moment, I think. He was 17, convicted of robbing a clothes shop. Just petty theft, really.
Right.
The fine wasn't huge, but his father, in this kind of severe attempt to teach him a lesson.
Tough love.
Proper tough love. He refused to pay the fine. So Ozzy ended up spending 6 weeks in Winson Green prison.
6 weeks in jail at 17.
Yeah. That grounded, harsh start really frames everything that came later, doesn't it? The whole rock star fantasy, the wealth, the fame. It must have felt absolutely miles away from that cell.
But the fantasy did take hold somewhere along the line. What was the initial spark? What pulled him towards music? Because it wasn't the dark, gloomy metal we know him for now, was it?
Not at all. You nailed it. It was pure pop genius. He credits hearing the Beatles, specifically their song She Loves You, back in 1963. He would have been, 14?
Yeah, just a kid.
And he saw that power, that excitement. In a documentary later, he said the Beatles made him realize he was going to be a rock star the rest of his life. Apparently pinned a note for his dad saying, just that, I'm leaving to become a rock star.
Amazing. And that inspiration, mixed with the sort of grim reality of Birmingham, led directly to the birth of heavy metal itself.
It did, eventually, but it was a pretty fragmented, almost desperate start. Late 67, Geezer Butler still Stillfoot. Terrence Butler then recruited Ozzy for his first band, Rare Breed.
How did it go?
It lasted 2 gigs, then broke up, but the connection was there. They soon regrouped, brought in Tony Iommi on guitar and Bill Ward on drums. both from a band called Mythology that had just split.
And they started as Pocahontas Blues.
Pocahontas Blues, yeah. Then briefly, very briefly, Earth.
And the definitive name change, Black Sabbath, came from that booking mix-up. That's such a classic rock and roll origin story.
It really is. Hilarious and very Ozzy somehow. They got booked for a gig meant for a different band, also called Earth. So to avoid confusion, they settled on Black Sabbath in August 1969.
Inspired by the Boris Karloff horror film.
Exactly, which was just a stroke of genius looking back. It immediately signaled how different they were from the standard blues rock scene everyone else was doing.
What's fascinating is how consciously they developed that sound, really leaning into the dark, gloomy aesthetic that would define, well, doom metal.
It wasn't just artistic whim either, it was quite commercially savvy in a way. They noticed audiences actually liked being frightened. That horror vibe gave them a unique selling point.
Right.
But the real moment of musical and lyrical definition, that came directly from Geezer Butler. He'd read an occult book, apparently, and shortly after woke up convinced he saw this dark figure, a specter, standing at the end of his bed.
Creepy.
Very. He told Ozzy about this terrifying experience, and together they wrote the lyrics to Black Sabbath, their first song that really went down that dark path.
And musically, they tapped into something quite specific too, didn't they?
That's a tritone?
The Devil's Chord.
That's right. That incredibly heavy, dissonant riff in the song Black Sabbath. It uses the tritone, the augmented fourth interval. It just inherently sounds unsettling, full of dread. Medieval music supposedly banned it for that reason.
Wow.
Plus, Tony Iommi. You have to remember his backstory, too. He'd had that awful factory accident, severed the tips of 2 fingers on his fretting hand.
Right, he made his own prosthetic tips.
Yeah, out of melted plastic bottle caps and leather. And to make playing easier, he had to tune his guitar down low. That lower tuning, further deepened the sound, made it heavier, slower, more menacing. It was entirely new.
And despite this completely novel, kind of abrasive sound, success followed pretty quickly, didn't it? Even without much love from critics or radio.
Swift and lasting success, yeah. They toured relentlessly. Those early albums, Black Sabbath and Paranoid, both in 1970, then Master of Reality in 71, they were commercially huge.
But the critics hated them.
Often, yeah. Master of Reality got absolutely slammed by influential critics like Lester Bangs at Rolling Stone, called it naive, simplistic, repetitive, absolute doggerel.
Ouch.
Brutal. Yet the fans bought it in droves. That record went double platinum decades later. The audience just knew what they liked, regardless of what the critics were saying.
But that success, or maybe the lifestyle that came with it, didn't exactly lead to internal harmony, did it? By the late 70s, things were falling apart.
Yeah, totally. By the late 1970s, the band was, frankly, a mess. Drowning in substance abuse, constant tension. The atmosphere was poisonous.
Especially between Ozzy and Iommi.
Yeah, particularly between them. Iommi was getting increasingly frustrated with Ozzy's unreliability, his drinking, his drug use. Ozzy, on the other hand, felt Iommi was manipulating the recordings, making him redo vocals endlessly, changing melodies without asking. It just became this vicious cycle of addiction and resentment.
And it all came crashing down in the spring of '79.
April 27, 1979. That was the day. The decision was made. At Iommi's insistence, really, but with support from Butler and Ward, who were also at their wits' end, Osbourne was kicked out of Black Sabbath.
The official reason being unreliability and substance abuse.
Which were undeniably huge issues, no question.
But didn't Ozzy always kind of argue that, well, everyone was doing it, that his usage wasn't that different from the rest of the band at the time?
He did maintain that, yeah. He argued his intake was similar, but maybe his behavior while under the influence was uniquely disruptive, or maybe he was just the easiest target. Regardless, the immediate aftermath for him was truly bleak. He got a payout, £96,000 for his share of the name. Sounds like a lot, maybe, but that was it. His entire stake.
And then what?
And then he basically locked himself away for 3 solid months, just binging on cocaine and alcohol. He genuinely thought his career was over. Finished. Believed he was destined to go back to Birmingham, back on the dole, just like before the Beatles ever happened.
It's incredible to think, from that absolute low point, that the narrative shifts so dramatically, from utter collapse to what became arguably an even more successful solo career.
It's an amazing comeback story, and it starts largely thanks to Don Arden, but crucially, his daughter, Sharon.
Right, Don Arden was managing Sabbath at the time.
He was. He signed Ozzy to Jet Records, but he didn't really believe in Ozzy as a solo act initially. His hope was that Ozzy would either crawl back to Sabbath or maybe name his new band Son of Sabbath.
Oh, God. Son of Sabbath.
Can you imagine? Ozzy absolutely hated it, despised it, saw it as just a cheap imitation. Dawn was really just hedging his bets, protecting his investment.
And this is where Sharon steps in and just fundamentally changes everything. She was sent to L.A. to, quote, look after Ozzy's needs.
Yeah, which was possibly the biggest understatement in rock management history. She wasn't just some assistant. She was dispatched to manage the chaos, protect the investment, basically babysit him.
But it became much more than that.
Oh, way more. She saw the potential beyond Sabbath. Ozzy was immediately drawn to her, not just physically, but because she got him, she believed in him when almost no one else did. Their professional relationship very quickly turned romantic.
And they got married in '82.
July 4th, 1982, Independence Day. Ozzy apparently chose the date quite practically, so he'd never forget their anniversary. Smart man.
Huh. And that marriage, that partnership, really became the bedrock of the whole Ozzy Osbourne brand, didn't it? Leveraging the chaos instead of just apologizing for it.
Absolutely. Sharon wasn't just his wife. She was his manager, strategist, protector, the driving force. And that partnership gave rise to the legendary Blizzard of Oz era, which was a massive musical departure from Sabbath.
Huge departure. Tell us about the band.
Late 79, the Blizzard of Oz band starts to form, and the core lineup was just electric. Randy Rhoads on guitar, we have to talk more about him. Bob Daisley on bass and crucially writing lyrics, and Lee Kerslake on drums.
And the debut album, Blizzard of Oz, just launched him.
Totally. It launched his solo career with a sound that, okay, it kept some of the darkness, but it added this whole new layer of technical skill, melody, complexity.
We absolutely have to stop and talk about Randy Rhoads here. He wasn't just a guitarist, he really defined a new era of guitar playing.
He absolutely did. Rhoads was different. He was steeped in classical music, classical technique. He brought this neoclassical sensibility to heavy metal that was just groundbreaking.
He didn't just shred, he composed.
Exactly. Listen to Crazy Train, the riff, the solo, or the sophistication in Mr. Crowley. That technical brilliance, which was kind of missing from the sludgier, later Sabbath stuff, it immediately set Ozzy's solo sound apart. Made him a leader in that whole new wave of British heavy metal scene, even though he was technically from the older generation.
And commercially, that record, Blizzard of Oz, monumental, quadruple platinum status in the U.S. eventually.
Yeah.
And crucially, without a single top 40 hit single. That's almost unheard of, especially then, early MTV era.
It really shows the power of that core fan base, doesn't it? An FM rock radio, album-oriented rock. The synergy between Ozzy's instantly recognizable voice and Rhoads' genius guitar work was just electric, which makes what happened next even more tragic.
Yeah, that brings us, unfortunately, to the heartbreaking death of Randy Rhoads in 1982. The circumstances are still just shocking.
It was a horrific, senseless accident. It plunged Ozzy into one of the deepest depressions of his life. They were on the Diary of a Madman tour down in Florida. The band's tour bus driver, this guy Andrew Aycock.
He had a pilot's license.
Yeah, but apparently it wasn't current. He took Rhoads and Rachel Youngblood, the band's seamstress and makeup artist, up in this small Beechcraft Bonanza plane that was parked nearby, without permission.
Just for a joyride.
Apparently. The pilot decided it would be fun to buzz the tour bus where Ozzy, Sharon, and others were sleeping. He did a couple low passes. On the third pass, the plane's wing clipped the top of the bus.
Oh my God.
Yeah, clipped the bus, hit a pine tree, and then crashed violently into the garage of a nearby mansion. It just burst into flames. Rhoads, Aycock, and Youngblood were all killed instantly.
The official NTSB finding just cited poor judgment by the pilot. It feels so inadequate.
It absolutely does. Doesn't capture the sheer chaos and the pain. Ozzy was utterly devastated. This was the guy who had just pulled him out of the post-Sabbath abyss, given him a new musical life, and now he was gone.
It must have thrown everything into turmoil.
Complete chaos. But the machine doesn't stop, does it? Contractual obligations didn't pause for grief. Randy was eventually replaced on the tour by Bernie Torme and then Night Ranger's Brad Gillis. And they still had a contract to deliver a live album.
Which led to Speak of the Devil later that year.
Yeah, and that album is fascinating in itself. It was recorded with Gillis on guitar, but it was composed entirely of Black Sabbath covers.
Despite the original plan being to record his solo stuff live.
Exactly. It was pure contract fulfillment. Maybe a slightly cynical move by the management or label to capitalize on the Sabbath connection, prove Ozzy could still sell those songs. Maybe even a bit of a middle finger back to his old band. Who knows? But the career had to keep moving. And Sharon was absolutely instrumental in making sure that happened somehow, despite the emotional wreckage.
They had to pivot quickly, find new talent to try and stabilize things after that tragedy.
They did. Jake E. Lee came in for the 1983 album Bark at the Moon. Very talented player, contributed some great heavy tracks. Bark at the Moon itself is a classic.
But the really enduring replacement for Rhodes, the one who became synonymous with Ozzy's sound for decades, arrived a bit later.
Zakk Wylde arrived in 87, first appearing on the 88 album No Rest for the Wicked. Wylde was just a powerhouse. He had that Rhodes technical skill, sure, but blended it with this heavier, bluesier, almost southern rock pinch harmonic squealing style. He became Ozzy's longest-serving musical partner, really, provided that essential guitar backbone for years.
And which albums really cemented that mid-career success? The ones that proved Ozzy wasn't just trading on Sabbath nostalgia or the early Rhodes magic?
Well, you've got The Ultimate Sin in 1986. That did really well, was his highest-charting studio album up to that point. But I think the real commercial peak of that era was 1991's No More Tears.
Mama, I'm Coming Home.
Exactly. That album spawned that huge hit, Mama, I'm Coming Home, which was, a surprisingly gentle, melodic ballad for Ozzy. Showed a different side. And interestingly, this was also the period where he started using major outside songwriters more. Like Lemmy from Motorhead co-wrote several tracks on No More Tears. It felt like a further professionalizing of the operation.
After all that renewed success, the sheer irony of then announcing a retirement tour. It's just classic rock and roll theater, isn't it?
Absolutely classic. In 1992, he launched the No More Tours tour, a very cheeky pun on the No More Tears album title.
And how long did that retirement last?
Predictably short-lived. But even in that supposed winding down, his power was undeniable. He picked up his first Grammy Award in 1994, Best Metal Performance for the live version of I Don't Want to Change the World from the Live and Loud album, confirmed that even retiring Ozzy still had immense stage presence.
And this sort of false retirement actually paved the way for the eventual Black Sabbath reunion, didn't it?
It kind of opened the door again. By 1995, retirement was clearly off the table. He released the album Osmosis and launched the brilliantly named Retirement Sucks Tour.
Love it.
And then, the formal Black Sabbath reunion started to gain momentum in 1997, largely centered around the Ozfest shows that Sharon had created. That led to the big live album reunion in 1998, and then intermittent touring with the original lineup, Ozzy, Tony, Geezer, Bill, over the next couple of decades.
Okay, so this next section. This is where the public image, the Prince of Darkness, really explodes. It completely overtook the musician in many ways. But what's crucial, as you mentioned earlier, is that this chaos wasn't just happening to him. It was actively managed, even monetized.
You've absolutely hit the nail on the head there. It started, I think, as genuinely chaotic behavior fueled by addiction and maybe his personality. But Sharon very quickly realized the incredible commercial value in that madman of rock persona. He leaned into it.
And that led to massive backlash, right? Particularly from religious groups.
Oh, intense backlash. Christian groups, especially in the U.S. during the 80s moral panic, accused him of actively promoting Satanism, of being this corrupting influence on teenagers. Figures like the Protestant fundamentalist Jeff Godwin wrote entire books denouncing him.
That's a heavy thing to have thrown at you, being called an agent of evil, basically. How did Ozzy handle that level of public demonization?
With a pretty potent mix of defiance and self-deprecating humor, actually. He definitely absorbed those charges into his stage persona, the imagery, the album art. But he also hit back. He wrote lyrics mocking the Christian right. Miracle Man, for instance, was a direct shot at the televangelist Jimmy Swaggart after his big sex scandal in '88.
And I love that anecdote about him actually joining the protesters outside his own show.
It just sums up his whole approach, doesn't it? He later said he felt he had this sort of symbiotic relationship with the evangelists and moral crusaders. He joked he once grabbed a sign, drew a smiley face on it, and just joined the picket line outside his own gig. Claimed he was keeping them in jobs. The controversy became the marketing. A brilliant, if utterly chaotic, brand strategy masterminded by Sharon.
Beyond the sort of theatrical defiance, there are the really infamous antics, the stories people know, even if they don't know his music. We have to quickly recap the big three.
Right, the holy trinity of Ozzy mayhem. First, the one that really cemented the brand of uncontrollable chaos. The Dove incident. 1981, a meeting with CBS Records executives in Los Angeles.
Right, so that's just to happen.
Well, allegedly, the plan was he'd release a couple of doves as a symbol of peace, a surprisingly gentle gesture for the Prince of Darkness. But he was heavily intoxicated. Instead of releasing the dove, He bit its head off.
No.
Yes. Bit its head off, then spat the head out onto the conference table. The shock value was instantaneous and, frankly, priceless for building that madman image.
Okay, that's grim. And then the bad incident, which instantly became rock mythology.
That was 1982 in Des Moines, Iowa. During a show, someone in the crowd threw a bat onto the stage. Ozzy, apparently thinking it was just a rubber prop,
Picked it up and bit its head off.
picked it up, bit its head off. It was only when the poor thing apparently reacted or its head detached in his mouth that he realized it was real.
Ugh. Was it definitely alive?
Well, the fan who threw it later claimed it was already dead, but Ozzy insisted it bit him. Either way, he had to undergo this horrible, painful course of rabies vaccinations afterwards, something he often joked about later, but it was a very serious medical situation at the time.
And finally, the incident that got him banned from a major U.S. city, the Alamo.
The Alamo incident, also in 1982. This one really shows how the substance abuse blurred the lines between, stage antics and actual criminal behavior. He was drunk, really drunk, and for some reason, wearing his wife Sharon's dress.
Why the dress?
Apparently for a photo shoot, and his own clothes had been confiscated earlier because he was being disruptive. So wearing the dress, he wandered outside and urinated on the Alamo Cenotaph in San Antonio, Texas.
Memorial.
Yeah, the monument honoring the defenders who died at the Battle of the Alamo. A hugely revered historical site. He was arrested almost immediately, fined, and then banned from performing in the city of San Antonio for a whole decade. Real-world consequences that time.
Speaking of serious consequences, we absolutely have to spend some time on the suicide solution lawsuits. These were terrifying for the Osbournes, hugely public, and raised massive legal and ethical questions about artistic freedom versus responsibility.
This was probably the most challenging period for them, legally and personally, definitely. The most prominent case kicked off in 1984, filed by the parents of John McCollum. He was a 19-year-old kid who tragically took his own life, allegedly while listening to Ozzy's song Suicide Solution, and similar lawsuits followed, involving the suicides of Michael Waller and Harold Hamilton in the following years.
And the central allegation was incredibly inflammatory, tapping right into the satanic panic of the 80s. That the song contained hidden, subliminal, or maybe even backmasked messages encouraging suicide.
Exactly. Critics and the plaintiffs claimed they could hear phrases like, "get the gun," or "shoot, shoot, shoot" if you played it backwards, or that the main lyrics themselves, even forwards, were an incitement. The specific line often cited was misinterpreted as "suicide is the only way out." The parents argued the music wasn't just expressing dark themes, it was directly causing lethal action.
That's a heavy accusation. How did the defense counter that?
The defense primarily centered on First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, and the artistic interpretation of the song. But what's really fascinating and complicates the narrative is that even within Ozzy's own camp, there wasn't a clear, single meaning attributed to the song.
Right, tell us about that conflict.
Well, Ozzy himself consistently claimed the song was intended as a warning against the dangers of alcoholism. He often said it was specifically inspired by the tragic death of Bon Scott, the AC/DC singer who died from acute alcohol poisoning in 1980. Solution, meaning liquid, as in alcohol.
Okay, that makes sense.
But Bob Daisley, the bassist who actually wrote the lyrics for the song, stated in court documents and interviews that the song was not about Bon Scott. He said it was written directly about Ozzy's own severe drinking problems at the time. Hence the title, Suicide Solution, meaning alcohol as a deadly suicidal path for Ozzy himself.
Wow. So even the creators disagreed on the intent. What did the courts decide? Because these cases could have had huge ramifications for the entire music industry.
Ultimately, the courts consistently ruled in Osbourne's favor. They determined there was no provable causal link between the song and the tragic suicides. Critically, the rulings affirmed that for speech to be considered unprotected incitement, it has to be shown to directly advocate or command imminent lawless action. And the song just didn't meet that high legal bar.
So legally, he was cleared.
Legally, yes. But the damage was done in many ways. The ambiguity of the song's meaning, combined with the horrific nature of the accusations and the intense negative media coverage, it permanently cemented his reputation in many conservative circles as a dangerous, corrupting figure. Even winning the court cases didn't erase that stigma.
Yet despite all that controversy, or maybe even fueled by it, Sharon managed to pivot that energy into something incredibly successful and mainstream. Ozzfest.
Ozzfest. It started in 1996, and the origin story is pure Sharon Osbourne tenacity. Apparently, Ozzy had been rejected by Lollapalooza, the big alternative festival at the time. They didn't think he fit.
Their loss.
Huge loss. Sharon, seeing this gap in the market for a major festival dedicated to hard rock and metal acts, just decided, fine, we'll do our own. And Ozfest became an immediate, massive financial and cultural success.
The numbers were huge, weren't they?
Astonishing. By 2005, it had reportedly grossed over $170 million. More importantly, it became this crucial launching pad for countless hard rock and heavy metal bands who were getting ignored by mainstream radio and MTV. Bands like Slipknot, System of a Down, Disturbed, they owe a huge debt to Ozfest.
And then came the move that took him from being a heavy metal icon known mainly to rock fans to being a genuine household name familiar to, like, your grandma.
Yeah.
Reality TV.
The Osbournes, yeah, the MTV reality show, ran from 2002 to 2005. It completely transformed his public image and made him this mainstream celebrity in a way music alone never could.
It really is seen as a pioneer of that whole celebrity family reality TV genre, isn't it?
Absolutely. It showcased their chaotic, dysfunctional, but weirdly endearing home life. It humanized Ozzy. He went from being the terrifying Prince of Darkness to this sort of lovable, bumbling, slightly out-of-it dad shuffling around the house looking for the remote control.
The contrast was amazing.
It was huge. The show was so massively popular that the family even hosted the 30th Annual American Music Awards in 2003, which was, predictably, marked by just constant bleeping and censorship because Ozzy and Sharon couldn't stop swearing or making outrageous comments. They brought their unique brand of chaos right into the heart of primetime network television.
We really can't leave this section without fully acknowledging the sheer scale of the substance abuse, because it's tragically woven through his entire story, especially his relationship with Sharon.
The excess was truly extreme, almost cartoonish at times, but with very real, dark consequences. It absolutely defines this era of chaos. He claimed, for instance, to have taken LSD every single day for 2 years straight back in the Sabbath days.
Every day for 2 years.
That's what he claimed. We talked about that 3-month binge after getting fired. Former bandmates, like bassist Rudy Sarzo, who played with him in the early 80s, wrote about the constant frustration of canceled shows, the violent mood swings he was prone to when drunk or high. It wasn't just rock star partying, it was debilitating.
And the most disturbing incident, the one that revealed the truly terrifying side of his addiction, happened in 1989.
That was a real breaking point. Sharon has spoken about it openly. He came back from the Moscow Music Peace Festival, this big event meant to symbolize East-West cooperation, completely out of his mind on drink and drugs. And he tried to strangle her.
He tried to kill her.
That's what she said. In an intoxicated blackout, he attacked her. She managed to hit a panic button. Police arrived. He was arrested. She pressed charges initially, but ultimately dropped them after he agreed to enter a serious, mandated 6-month rehabilitation program. She later said she had to choose between destroying his life by pursuing the charges or trying to regain her faith in him during recovery.
That's an impossible choice.
Unimaginable. And Ozzy himself later admitted to other shocking acts done while severely impaired, things that went way beyond biting heads off animals, shooting all 17 of his pet cats one by one because he was bored and drunk, snorting a line of live ants off the pavement on a dare, tossing raw meat into the crowd at gigs. These weren't just eccentric rock star antics, they were the symptoms of a profound, life-threatening addiction spiraling completely out of control.
It is, frankly, a genuine miracle, given everything we've just discussed in that last section, that Ozzy Osbourne survived as long as he did.
Yeah.
He was often described as being indestructible, like a medical marvel.
Yeah.
But the last couple of decades really saw him confront significant, debilitating health battles.
Yeah, the physical toll of decades of, extreme self-abuse finally caught up with him, but he fought it relentlessly, didn't he? He'd always suffered from tremors, which for years he just put down to residual damage from all the drink and drugs.
Yeah.
But in 2003, it was confirmed. He had a genetic form of Parkinson's disease, specifically Parkin2, which apparently affects motor control, required daily medication to manage the symptoms. He didn't go public with the diagnosis until 2020, but when he did, he was very clear, saying something like, "I'm not dying from Parkinson's. I've known I've had it for some time." Still defiant, you know?
And the physical setbacks just kept piling up, didn't they, making the demands of touring seem almost impossible.
They really compounded the problem, massively. In December 2003, he had that absolutely horrific quad bike accident on his estate in Buckinghamshire.
That sounded awful.
It was incredibly serious. He flipped the bike, broke his collarbone, 8 ribs, and crucially a vertebra in his neck. The crash was so bad he actually stopped breathing at the scene. His bodyguard at the time, Sam Rustin, had to perform resuscitation before he was airlifted to hospital. Recovering from that kind of trauma, especially with an underlying neurological condition like Parkinson's, it makes movement, let alone performing high-energy rock shows, incredibly difficult.
And then fast forward to 2019, and another major incident effectively ended his touring career for good.
Yeah, a really bad fall at his home in Los Angeles. Caused significant spinal damage, aggravating the old neck injury from the quad crash. It's catastrophic, really. It required major surgery, multiple surgeries, in fact, followed by years of painful rehabilitation and physiotherapy.
And this derailed his final tour attempt.
Completely. He'd started the No More Tours 2 tour back in 2018. Yeah, another final tour. But the spinal damage, combined with the arrival of the COVID-19 pandemic shutting everything down, meant constant postponements. He kept hoping, kept rescheduling for 3 years. But finally, in January 2023, he had to announce its permanent cancellation. He just physically couldn't do it anymore. It marked his involuntary retirement from the road. A really tough end to that part of his life.
But despite being unable to tour, incredibly, he continued recording new music, and it was really well received right into his final years.
He was creatively firing on all cylinders almost until the very end. It's quite remarkable. His later career albums are really strong. You've got Black Rain in 2007, which he proudly stated was the first album he ever wrote and recorded completely sober. That's a huge personal milestone right there.
Absolutely.
Then Ordinary Man in 2020, which had that surprising duet with Elton John on the title track. And his final studio album, Patient Number 9, released in 2022.
And that won Grammys, didn't it?
It did. Picked up a Grammy in 2023 for Best Rock Album and Best Metal Performance for the track Degradation Rolls. And that track, incredibly, featured a guest solo from Tony Iommi, bringing his career full circle, collaborating with Tony even on his newest solo material right near the end.
Given his health issues, a quiet fade from public view was probably never on the cards. His journey almost had to end with one final, dramatic, and really poignant farewell performance, back where it all began.
And what a powerful final statement it was, bringing the whole story of the working-class kid from Aston right back home to Birmingham, July 5, 2025. He played his Fod'll Ever show, billed perfectly as Back to the Beginning, at Villa Park, Aston Villa's football ground.
It was a proper Black Sabbath reunion.
The original lineup, yeah. Ozzy, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward back behind the drums, the one fans had always hoped for. But it was visually quite shocking, quite moving. Because of the progression of the Parkinson's, he'd lost much of his ability to walk or stand for long periods. So Ozzy performed the entire show seated on this specially designed, quite imposing black throne.
Wow.
Yeah, it was this incredibly potent image of defiance, but also vulnerability. The Prince of Darkness, still commanding the stage, but needing this throne, in front of 40,000 adoring fans in his hometown.
That show must have been incredibly emotional, completing the circle, starting and ending with the original band right there in Birmingham.
Just 17 days after that final triumphant performance, on July 22, 2025, John Michael Osbourne died peacefully at his home in Buckinghamshire. He was 76 years old.
And the cause of death?
The official cause was listed as acute myocardial infarction, heart attack, and out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. Doctors associated it with his underlying coronary artery disease, likely exacerbated by the long-term effects of Parkinson's disease.
The tributes that followed were immense, weren't they? Highlighting his unique status, stretching way beyond just the hard rock community.
The public outpouring was huge. There was a massive funeral cortege procession through Birmingham. It passed his childhood home on Lodge Road, paused symbolically at the Black Sabbath Bridge on Broad Street, which had been named in their honor so his family could view the sea of fan tributes left there.
And that tribute from Buckingham Palace.
That was extraordinary, wasn't it? The band of the Coldstream Guards, the ones in the bearskin hats playing Paranoid during the changing of the guard ceremony, Black Sabbath echoing around Buckingham Palace. That single moment probably confirmed his status as a true, albeit unconventional, national cultural icon, despite all the decades of controversy and mayhem.
So his legacy, as we've gone through in such detail, clearly dual. He was the revolutionary pioneer with Black Sabbath, rightly called the godfather of heavy metal.
Absolutely. He helped invent a genre.
And then he was this enduring, often controversial solo artist who generated multi-platinum hits across decades, constantly reinventing himself, defining heavy music for generations.
He was, and he remained, one of the most commercially successful artists in the entire history of hard rock and heavy metal. Sustaining that career through decades, where so many contemporaries faded away, is remarkable in itself. And beyond the music, you can't ignore the impact of the Osbournes. It really did pioneer that modern era of celebrity family reality TV. He was hard rock's ultimate comeback kid, wasn't he? He just defied every single expectation, especially the ones predicting his own early demise due to that unbelievable lifestyle.
Which brings us perfectly to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. We've traced the narrative, the chaos, the extreme addiction, the seemingly impossible longevity. Given the sheer depth of his struggles, the decades and decades of extreme physical and chemical stress his body endured and somehow survived, how might the analysis of his full genome really change things? Remember, scientists at this company, Gnome, famously sequenced his entire DNA back in 2010, looking for answers. Could that genetic blueprint truly redefine our understanding of human survival under extreme adversity? Is there something fundamentally biologically different about Ozzy Osbourne that allowed him to outlast a lifestyle that killed so many others? Perhaps offering us biological insights that reach far beyond just the world of rock and roll.